Good morning. I will say again, good morning and welcome and happy New Year for some we haven't seen, but just really excited. And I'm super excited for a lot of reasons. A, because it's going to warm up today. B, because the Hoosiers won. But not only that, because we have an exciting presenter who started us last year with some great thoughts and updates and commentary, and we'll hear from again where we've come over the year. But as important as all of that, one of the things that I'm excited about that I want to share, let me see if I can share my screen so I can share with you some of the things that the Diversity Roundtable is doing for many that have been with us for a while and just our supporters over almost 26, 27 years. We've had a brand and a focus that's been pretty consistent, but I'm just really excited to share at the top of our conversation today that the Diversity Roundtable has updated some things that we're doing with the new mission and vision and focus and even logo. So what you'll see on my shared screen is the Diversity Roundtable, Catalyst for Inclusive Leadership, which is why I'm excited about what we're doing in 2026 and beyond. So first of all, you'll see on the screen, hopefully, the new brand and focus. What you'll see when you go to the website, you'll see these updates and this new look, and then very shortly, you will see some updated options even regarding membership. So again, just as we head into a new year, just excited and want to just tip my hat to the board for all the hard work they've done to pull together our new focus and the new things that we're doing. So thanks again, everyone, for all that you've done for that. Now let me see if I can go to the next slide. And that is, as I mentioned, some of the things to expect in the near term. First of all, certainly our website and our social media and all of that will be updated to reflect the new look, and you'll see that as you go online, even today. As I mentioned, we will have some slightly updated membership levels to give you more opportunities to participate and support and even sponsor the things that we do. And then lastly, we haven't forgotten about our annual conference, which will be later this year, probably in the late August timeframe. Andrew, who's on with us, is our conference committee chair, and will be leading in that. And would certainly love to have others participate on the conference committee. So over the course of the next few weeks and months, you'll hear more about the conference and an opportunity to participate there. So I'll stop before I kick off to Dr. Officer and say, any questions, any thoughts about our new mission, vision, focus, and just the things that we're doing? Okay, hearing none. As I mentioned, we've got a really exciting presenter. I'm always looking forward just to hear what Ms. Doneisha has to say. I'm going to kick over to our Director of Programs, Dr. James Officer, to introduce and share anything else about our presenter. And again, welcome.
Well, thank you, Zale. Good morning to everyone. So we are launching our Q1 of 2026 program format, and I wanted to just share a bit about that before I introduce our speaker and sponsor. So for the next 3 months, our focus is going to be resilience, reflection, and renewal, supporting the inclusive leadership and the shifting landscape. Today, for the January, we're focusing on reflecting on 2025. And again, Dale's always pointed out, it's already pointed out, probably no one better to do that than the individual who kind of talked about the impact and what might be the impact a year ago. So we'll hear from her in just a bit. Next month, we're going to focus on supporting the well-being folks who are working in the space, youth. And then in March, renewing commitment and resilience. So really, this whole first quarter is focused on you, the individuals who are working in leadership in inclusive environments. That would mean everybody working in leadership. And so with that, I want to introduce Doneisha Posey. She is by training an immigration and civil rights attorney. She is by application a business strategist and an educator. And she is by choice passionate, inclusive leader. And we are honored to present her. I will let her talk a little bit more about Centra, who is our sponsor this quarter. She's also the founder and CEO of that organization. So I'll ask her to talk a bit about that and then share her comments that will lead us through today's discussion. With that, Nisha, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It is bright and early, 8:30 on a Wednesday morning, and I'm so excited that you all chose to be here with me this morning as we talk about everything that happened in 2025 and what we can expect or hope to expect, or not hope to expect, actually, in 2026. All right, I'm going to try to share my screen. Let me see if I can do this right. Okay, did I do it?
You
Yeah,
did.
that's it.
Okay. All right. Okay, just making sure I got my bearings together. All right, and I will talk about Accenture a little bit within this presentation. So all right. So last year I kicked us off. What day? I think it was like January 22nd, maybe last year, like almost to the date. I kicked off the diversity roundtables programming last year, and we talked about equity under fire. We had just started the Trump and Braun administrations. We had just received some legal decisions. We had kind of, I think maybe a month or two before, the Fearless Fund case had reached a decision where they had mediated and settled some things. Coming off of the Students for Fair Administration case, there was just a lot going on in 23 and 24. And we had strong signals that 2025 was going to be a pivotal year for DEI. And yes, it was. I'll just leave it there. Also, if you have any questions for me throughout the presentation, go ahead and just put them in the chat. I'll try to monitor the chat as I'm going. If you've ever been in a presentation with me, you know I like to be as engaging as possible, answer your questions in real time, and not try to wait until, the end or, if you forget something. So go ahead and ask me as you're thinking of things. All right, so today we are circling back 1 year later to reflect, to regroup, and to ready ourselves for what's ahead in 2026. You all are leaders doing this work in real time. So whether you're in a nonprofit, in a corporation, in a school, in healthcare system, in other community spaces, I really want to ground us in these guiding questions. This guiding question down here. How did 2025 change our DEI ecosystems? And what is most worth carrying forward? So, as Dr. Officer mentioned, I am an attorney. But today's conversation is not just about any sort of legality. It's also about strategy, ethics, language, and leadership. All right, so here's how we're going to spend the next hour. We're going to start with a rundown of what actually happened in 2025. I'm going to refresh your memories from executive orders to courtroom decisions. And then we're going to zoom in how different sectors responded, what trends we saw. I'll share some lessons and some legal insights that we've been gathering across the country. Then we'll shift towards how we future-proof this work. So race neutral strategies, intersectional framing, legal compliance audits, and other things of that nature. Hopefully we'll have some time. I have a breakout activity, hopefully we can get to. And then we'll end with time for questions, and I'll stay on for anything that you'd like to discuss. All right, so Accenture Strategies. We are a consulting firm that aligns strategy, talent, and resources to deliver impactful solutions and measurable results. So basically, we work with organizations, work with a lot of nonprofits, especially to ensure that their strategies and structures that their workplace culture and that their leadership has the tools that they need to have measurable results and solutions. If you have any needs, if you're looking for help, if you're looking for a partner to come alongside you, whether it's related to diversity, equity, inclusion, or community engagement or strategy, we are your group. Yeah, that's it. And I'm just really excited to be the sponsor for the first quarter of the Diversity Roundtable conversations. So thank you all for the opportunity. And I'll see you all next month as well, just as a sponsor, not as a speaker. All right, so let's get into it. I wanted to talk about 2025 in review, looking at the legal and political shifts. So what we saw quickly, a sharp rise in anti-DEI rhetoric and the chilling effect across all sectors, honestly. And this wasn't just political noise. It truly translated into real consequences for how many organizations operate. I'm sure so many of you in this room can personally relate to how it has affected your organization. All right, so some key federal actions that happened early 2025. We saw on Martin Luther King Day last year, Trump came in with several executive orders. And they reframed DEI as being discriminatory. They never defined DEI. They never said what was discriminatory. But as we know, it had not only just a chilling effect in organizations, but an actual financial effect. So we saw federal funding and contracting guidance limiting any identity-based initiatives. There was a lot of defunding or freezing of DEI-focused offices and audits that translated to a lot of nonprofits, especially here in our state of Indiana, that did not receive certain federal grants. And then we also, not only didn't see federal grants, but we also saw small businesses not being chosen for any sort of supplier diversity efforts that they had normally had with the federal government. And we all know everything that happened federally also happened locally here in our state with our governor pretty much mirroring what was happening at the federal level. Within federal agencies, I think one of the most consequential shifts from 2025 not only came from executive orders, but how federal enforcement agencies, especially the EEOC, began interpreting and enforcing civil rights laws. So historically, Title VII enforcement focused on remedying systemic discrimination against marginalized groups. In 2025, that posture shifted. The EEOC began signaling a much narrow view of what constitutes lawful DEI activity. The most striking example was when the chair of the EEOC publicly urged white men, this happened in December, just this past month, white men to come forward and report discrimination. That message, from from my vantage point, was a clear invitation for reverse discrimination claims. Now, there's no such thing as reverse discrimination claims. Discrimination is discrimination, but this is kind of the starting point, and we saw a lot of litigation happening in 2025 where white men or folks from whatever majority community instituting and starting discrimination claims across the country in different state and federal courts. All right. So, as I was just mentioning on the legal front lines in 2025, we already we already saw aggressive, really, state legislation banning DEI offices or staff in public universities and government agencies, such as our great state of Indiana. We saw DEI offices being closed at insane rates, especially in higher education, but also within state government. We saw, as I mentioned, a sharp rise in lawsuits brought by individuals claiming this reverse discrimination, not in just philanthropy, which we had originally saw with the Fearless Fund, but also in hiring, promotions, admissions as it relates to education. And these claims we saw being amplified by political and media. Federal investigations. Yeah, so we saw a lot of federal investigations happening that looked at race conscious policies in higher education. So, including scholarships, for example, for Black or Latinx students, grant making criteria in the nonprofit and philanthropic spaces for foundations or government funded programs. A lot of nonprofits, again, saw their programs, their grants being cut from both the state, federal, and even at the foundation level. The key shift wasn't just in these like legal wins or losses, it was really the perception. So DEI work, which was once seen from some, right, as a best practice, we saw a huge, rise in DEI activity in 2020 with the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery happening. And it was a best practice in a lot of organizations, but now it is seen as a legal liability. General counsels in different organizations are now reviewing DEI job descriptions. Foundations are asking whether their criteria can survive legal challenges, and colleges obviously are facing the most scrutiny, really, with as they're also looking at financial aid packages as scholarships and other things such as that. So this new climate means DEI practitioners aren't just leading culture work. They're being pulled into risk management conversations if there's still a conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion in different organizations. And it's a fundamental change from how this work was positioned just a few years ago. The legal front lines now span, state houses, courts, compliance departments. And if you are a DEI professional or someone working to ensure equity and access is a part of the work that's being done in your organization, you must be prepared to navigate all three. All right. And then we saw a huge shift in tone, right? We went from being bold about DEI to being very cautious. Many organizations that once celebrated DEI are now quietly rebranding it. Equity is disappearing from many titles. DEI roles are being merged into HR or compliance teams. And general counsel and other attorneys are sitting in on any sort of DEI planning meetings. For many, the fear of litigation has now replaced fear of staying silent. There's nothing in the chat, right? Okay, just making sure I'm not getting anything. All right, so how did organizations respond? And so after everything we just kind of discussed, it's no surprise that many organizations reassess their approach to DEI. This wasn't just about legality, right? Again, it was about perception. It was about optics. It's about funding for sure and brand risk. DEI efforts in 2025 were often repositioned under the language of culture, civility, employee well-being, leadership development, which are all great things and things that need to happen. But it is not necessarily the same. Entire DEI departments being absorbed into HR or compliance teams. In some cases, DEI was completely rebranded to sound, race neutral, not to better serve equity, but to survive scrutiny. And this is the positive, right? Many people were let go, right? A lot of folks in any sort of equity role lost their positions in 2025. The entire office completely eliminated. And so we saw, pretty much across the gamut, how organizations responded to what was happening at the federal level that may or may not have even applied to them in the type of work that they did. All right, so from the corporate world, we saw a tactical shift, right? So supplier diversity programs were paused or reframed as small business inclusion. Goals around race or gender were swapped out for skills-based hiring models or economic disadvantage criteria, taking out any sort of identity-based goals. We saw, executives become more focused on stakeholder trust and avoiding legal risk more than trying to be transformational in their work. But some companies responded with creativity, right? They rewrote job descriptions, they repackaged programs, they worked with legal counsel to future-proof their equity commitments. The top concern as we looked across the country at all sorts of sectors, industry sectors within the corporate industry, that the exposure to litigation was a top concern and pushback from their stakeholders, from their board. We saw how that affected some organizations, like Target, for example, and how the community responded to that as well. All right. Nonprofits faced a different kind of challenge. A top question was, how do you continue to serve communities of color, for example, when the language that names them becomes the liability? And so grant criteria was rewritten to focus on barriers to opportunities or place-based disadvantage rather than race. And then we also saw, it was very interesting, donors, right, either pushing back against DEI or urging their nonprofits to be more bold, which created a lot of tension internally for organizations. How do we continue to do the work that we do if, again, the work that we do is being seen as a legal liability? And so, in the work that I do with the DEI legal risk audits and assessments that I've been doing all year long, a question that starts the conversation is, how do we stay in alignment with our mission without putting our 501c3 status at risk or our funding at risk? All right. And then, as I kind of mentioned, perhaps the most direct legal shifts that we saw were in public with the government and then educational sectors. In higher ed, affirmative action was ended by the Supreme Court pretty much in 2023, and admissions offices had to move swiftly to a more holistic model. We saw some states, including Indiana, pass legislation banning DEI roles or offices in public institutions altogether. And local government rewrote equity frameworks to comply with the 14th Amendment requirements. And so, again, some institutions found workarounds, prioritizing geographic equity or economic indicators or first generation status as a workaround to ensuring that they still serve the communities that they know were important and needed. And it's clear, right, that the mandate for equity hasn't disappeared, but we have to fundamentally change how to pursue it. All right, so that kind of was the lay of the land. Looking at the political and legal landscape from 2025. And after a year like 2025, we're not just reacting anymore, right? We really have to reflect. I think the biggest lesson that folks learned is that DEI isn't just a moral framework. It shouldn't have been just a moral framework. It is not, changing hearts and changing hearts and minds, right? It is really about the legal landscape, ensuring that folks have equitable access to whatever the services is that your organization is providing. And that means the work must evolve in our language, in our scope, and in our execution. The organizations that made it through this year didn't just shift optics, right? Changing their website, changing their videos, their pictures, their social media. They redesigned how they talk about, how they structure, and how they defend their programs. So what we learned is powerful, and really, it's now time to carry it forward. All right. So, Dr. Officer talked about, the this quarter being about you all and about how we can be more resilient and what is really coming out of this. And so I really want to pause right here because I know a lot of you have lived this. This human cost of this increased scrutiny. Not, we already had targets on our back, right, from the beginning. If you're doing DEI work, if you're a person of color, if you're a woman, etc. And so you already were feeling the scrutiny, the eyes on you. But now folks are feeling like walking liabilities. Their colleagues are asking, can we still say this? Or do we even need this anymore? The burnout, right, of spending more time rewriting statements or, justifying who you are and what you do than actually engaging the community, actually making a difference in the work that you were set out to do. These experiences are not just, political and, like I said, optics. It's really deeply personal. If you're doing this work, it's because you really care. This is something that, at least for me, right? This is my lifelong, this is who I am. And so this is personal. And I think we all share in that. Just this past year, I had a participant in one of my listening sessions tell me, like, we're still trying to do the work, but it feels like we're always on trial. Every word, everything we try to put out there, it is being scrutinized and looked at by five different people. Everyone, red marking everything. And this sense of hyper visibility is real, right? But it doesn't have to be the end of DEI. You don't have to take this as, I'm just going to stop doing this work. I think this is truly a call to evolve the work. Can you say more about move from fear of litigation to fear of staying silent? Let me go back.
You had just mentioned that as we were going over one of the slides where people were really kind of feeling that transition, and it rang in my ears and my heart a little bit.
Oh,
And so I was
okay.
wondering from your perspective when you talked about that, what were you thinking about?
Yeah. So, well, I think I was saying people were the fear of staying silent was um what we had originally, right? If people were like, well, if we don't say anything, then we don't care about equity. So we're gonna say something, right? To now it's like, well, no. If we say something, then someone's going to challenge us. We're going to get a lawsuit. So the fear has moved from we can't stay silent, we can't, not say anything to we better not say anything because that fear of litigation is stronger than that fear of remaining silent.
Yeah. And then internally, you're afraid of the silence again, I think.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so we talked about, some organizations did keep moving forward, right? We're not going to act like everything just stopped forever. And it's not because they were braver. Some of them are, Sure. But many of them were smarter about risk. And so here's what made the difference. DEI teams collaborated with legal and compliance early and not just in a response to a problem. I think being a lawyer, being someone that is both, a lawyer and a DEI, professional, I saw the DEI folks like, we don't want legal in here. They're just going to erase it. They're going to tell us we can't do this, right? Because the lawyer's job is to mitigate risk. Any sort of risk, they're here to say, okay, let's not do that, right? And so that led, DEI and folks who were trying to move the work forward not to bring legal in until the very last minute. Well, we've already started this work. We've already started doing this stuff. And then when you bring legal in at the end, they could just cut the whole thing, right? And sometimes their word is going to be higher than your word. And so if you're able to collaborate with legal early on, to me, that helps to ensure that having legal counsel embedded in your strategy from the beginning allows the organization to move forward with the work that you're trying to do. Another thing that helped in this past year was programming being framed through multiple lenses, right? So this intersectional framing versus being exclusive, right? So looking at multiple lenses, disability, economic mobility, veteran status, other things like that, and not just race, allowed organizations to continue the programming that they were doing without taking a race neutral approach, but still ensuring that the demographics, the sectors, the segments that they were looking to target, they were still able to do so. And then another thing that helped in this past year with organizations that continue to move forward with their equity work was that the impact was measured with data and not just narratives. We've been saying this forever. True DEI professionals know that data matters and not just these narratives or these one-offs. You can still tell powerful stories, but again, you need metrics behind them. And that is within every layer of an organization needs to ensure that whatever the work is that they're doing, it is backed by data and outcomes. Come on. All right. Something I just need to say plainly, like period, point blank, DEI is still not illegal, right? Like it has never been illegal. It is not illegal. Please, like, don't listen to them, whoever the them are. Like, don't listen to whatever they're saying. There is a myth that this work is entirely off limits. It is not, right? Most DEI practices were legal before and they're still legal afterwards, right? What we need is clarity. We don't need silence. We don't need organizations to just stop doing the work that they've been doing. The challenge is knowing what's legally compliant and then how to document, how to train, and how to position your efforts accordingly. Again, the problem isn't that DEI is illegal. The problem is that organizations, again, stop doing it altogether out of fear. Being a risk-aware leader means asking, what can we do? How can we do it better? And not, okay, should we just quit? Should we just give this up altogether? I think I see something in the chat. Can you talk specifically about how Accenture is supporting organizations navigate the new legal landscape while maintaining the competitive edge that drives diversity provides? I will for sure talk about that. Thank you. All right. How am I doing on timing? All right. I think I'm good. Okay, so future-proofing DEI in 2026. So one of the biggest mistakes organizations made in 2025 was treating DEI as a temporary campaign, right? Something that could be paused, rebranded, pulled back. But DEI should have never been a separate program, a siloed thing. It is a strategy function like finance, HR, or compliance, right? It is not this standalone program over here. Should be part and parcel of your organization. So moving from DEI as an initiative to being part of the infrastructure of an organization. Um, you should be asking, or we need to be asking, is equity showing up in our policies? Is equity showing up in our budgets? Is equity showing up in our organization charts? When DEI becomes part of the system and not just this statement, not just this cool thing to do, it is that much harder to dismantle. All right, so I want to talk about mitigating risk and not mission. So if 2025 taught us anything, it's that risk isn't something to ignore or to overreact to. We have to manage it. We manage risk. We don't ignore it. We don't overreact. We manage it. How? Well, how do we manage the risk? You have to stay current on the federal and state laws. We saw so much change happening in 2025, happening rapidly at both the federal level and the state level. You have to bring your legal counsel to the table early or bring a central strategist to the table, right? Document everything. Your rationale, right? Your rationale for certain programmings or why you're doing it. The intended outcomes, right? And your evaluation methods. And your intended outcomes and your evaluation methods and all of that should be data informed, not just, well, we want more Black and brown, participants in our program. Why is that? What does the data show us? What is the data showing in terms of the populations that you're currently serving? Do you see a disparity there? What specifically are you doing to ensure that you're creating equitable outcomes, not equal outcomes, right? But equitable outcomes that folks have the opportunity and that you've reached these target audiences. You're doing certain outreach methods to reach certain demographics, all those sorts of things, but you are documenting all of that. And then be consistent. You have to make sure your programs are mission aligned across all documentation. So, whether we're talking about your grant language, your job descriptions, your website copy, and public statements, it needs to be consistent. And that's what these organizations that are going around the country, they're looking at different websites, they're looking at different programs, and they are bringing forth legal challenges based off of a lot of inconsistency that folks have, whether it's on their website or any sort of public statements or even their internal policies. We talked about language mattering, right? So that is a reality. Language is a liability or it can be a shield, right? I think so many times last year, I know you guys remember seeing those lists come out like, oh, these are all the banned words, like, and that list kept growing. And so reframing our language is important. So, some of our old terms are now red flags for litigation. I didn't say that they were illegal terms. I said they are red flags for litigation. So, it's not to say that if someone sued you for saying DEI training, for example, that they would win, but the possibility that your organization has to spend their time, their money, their resources litigating something silly like that, you don't want to be a part of that, right? So it doesn't stop. So we don't stop saying what we mean. We get better at how we say it. So I mean, we have to think about our messaging like code switching for legal safety. Again, not to dilute your values at all, but adapting for clarity, precision, and compliance. So here's some of the things that I've, in talking with some of my clients, changing from DEI training to leadership effectiveness, changing from any sort of race-based grant to targeted economic mobility fund, Even affinity group, right? You can reframe that to employee connection network. Another way to got something in the chat. What do we do when it's something like in
And
or
reaction to ICE, like I don't know how you don't just talk about the thing. You know what I mean? Like it's not about like ICE's snatching black and brown people off the streets and out of their homes isn't just language. Like I don't know how you say the thing without saying the thing. And so I'm starting to ask my nonprofit organization, like, what will we say? What will we do when they come to Indy? Because it's
they're
probably going to happen. And
they're here.
so
I mean, they're not huge
right.
like
They're
in other
here.
places.
Absolutely. They're here. There are people been detained and deported for years, even decades. But as it becomes a more escalated strategy nationwide by the federal
Yeah,
government in the spotlight of media, I guess is a way to put
yeah,
it. You know, silence is an action,
yeah.
and you can't just kind of like like so I'm just curious if you have any specific advice when it's beyond just like our messaging and language that's um maybe something we can design more versus
Yeah.
like it's straight a violent action that was racist. And so like how do you not say that, or like what do we do if you have any thoughts on that, because
Yeah.
there's things that are happening that you can't sculpt to
Yes,
me.
because they're just like there's no well, I guess there is. I was about to say there's no history of how this has happened. We do have a lot of
Yes,
history of how this
a
has happened.
lot.
A
Yes,
lot.
a lot.
But how it's manifesting today, based off of the laws and the Constitution in our country, that's where we're saying like, well, how is this happening? How is this happening the way that it's happening when the law should be on our side
Right.
on this,
Right.
right?
We went through so much and people died because of it. So like
Correct.
why is this back here? And so
Correct.
how do, I don't know if you have
Yeah.
any thoughts legally,
Um,
because we do have freedom of speech, but also we know that locally and nationally there are repercussions happening. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's very tough for organizations, right? Because you are having to balance, I want my team, my staff to feel safe. I want them to feel like they have the knowledge of what to do if ICE, for example, does come into our organization and starts trying to, you know, take people from within our offices. Um, but I also don't want to bring unnecessary attention to our organization because that could then truly bring ICE here or truly bring some negative repercussions to our organization. So, how do I balance that? And I think one, it depends on the organization and the type of work that you do. If you are a community focused organization that folks in the community are coming into your organization, receiving services, then that's a different conversation than an organization that doesn't receive that doesn't do direct services in the community. Because, one is based off of safety, knowledge of what to do when there is any sort of federal agency or even the police, right? Being able to train your team to know what to do versus an organization that doesn't necessarily have that and people just want to talk about what's going on, current events in the world. Um, I know I'm not answering your question fully because it really depends on the organization, how I would advise them to move that conversation forward. But again, this is we're in a tough spot because you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't in a lot of instances. So even like as I'm looking at this slide that I have in front of me, invest in equity literacy. So building that knowledge within your team on making sure that your organization, your board, your leadership understands the legal landscape, ensuring that your middle managers know what's allowed and what's not allowed, having some clear talking points for folks, excuse me, making sure your comms team is using inclusive and compliant language, and then that your staff feel empowered to name values without fear, and being able to train, repeat, and normalize that within organizations. To me, that's kind of a first step, because if folks don't understand what language, what is the shared language of your organization, if folks don't understand what the shared training needs to be around, like I said, if ICE comes into your organization or office, what to do, then people are going to be fearful. They won't talk about it at all. And then that makes the other people say, we're being cowards. We're not saying anything. Things are happening and we're just turning a blind eye to it. Yes, this slide. Okay. All right. So, you don't have to carry this alone, right? Strategic partnering for impact. Some of the most successful pivots that I've seen this past year truly came from folks collaborating. So partnering with legal experts and culturally responsive consultants like Accenture Strategies. We are an organization. I am a legal expert in a lot of the things that are going on around DEI and immigration and all those things right now. So having a partner to come alongside you to help you and guide you through this mess, because that's what it is, without diminishing or diluting the value and the mission of your organizations. Um, a consultant who understands the cultural nuances and the legal guardrails, and then lean into funders who are still willing to innovate with you. We are seeing philanthropic funders that are excited to help organizations figure things out. The appetite is there. You just have to be clear. You have to continue to be bold and aligned with your organization values. Okay, so I have time. Okay. I want to do a little breakout. Maybe we don't have to do breakout. How many folks are in this room? Let's see. Oh, there's 26. Would we be able to do 3 breakout rooms? I'm asking on the cuff. I did not ask this at the beginning. You can tell me now.
I believe I can make that happen. There's 25 though if you take out off
Okay.
the host. Yeah.
Okay. All
But
right.
yeah, I can do breakout rooms for you.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you figure out, just put three different groups of folks. So what I'm going to give you guys some space to kind of hear from each other for the next, let's just say 8 minutes. I'll give you 8 minutes. What's something, oh, let me move forward. So can we keep this? I don't know how this works with the breakout rooms. Well, how do I go to my next slide? Okay. Can we keep this slide up in all the breakout rooms? This is what I want folks to ask themselves. How are you currently adapting your DEI strategy in this climate? What has worked or not worked this past year? And what's one bold idea you have for future-proofing equity work in your organization? If it doesn't stay up, then I'll put it in the chat.
Yep. I was gonna say I just recommend if everybody try to take a screenshot just in case it doesn't stay up, or to drop it in the chat so that you
Okay.
guys have the questions there.
All right. Oh, it moved back. Okay, so I need to stop sharing. Okay, if you want to bring everybody back, we can do that.
Okay, awesome. It's giving them a 60-second timer.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, I need to do advanced portion of screen. Okay.
All right, we should have everyone back.
All right. So I did go from room to room to kind of hear what the conversations were. So it sounded like you all we're pretty much all on the same page about what your organizations were currently doing. You talked about what has been working. I'm not sure if everyone was able to get to that last question around what's one bold idea that you have for future proofing equity work in your organization. If anyone has any thoughts, or if you did get to that, I'd love to hear from one or two folks on that before we have our final reflection.
Well, one thing I heard that I loved in my group was looking at the past at some of the organizing and preparation that organizations like SNCC did. And I think one thing that I miss in Indianapolis that was in Chicago that I align with that comment about is community organizing and really uplifting the voices of the people who are still really committed to equity and committed to anti-racism because we're here. And I don't think in Indianapolis we're a small group. I think it's a large group. And so really helping people build their people power from the grassroots up, whether you're trying to talk to people in power in your organization to stay committed or in the larger community, like our city council or state representatives. I think that's really important. And Indianapolis would benefit from investing more in that.
Thank you, Claire. Anyone else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to share. I think so. Gallup has always done studies, and I think they found 70% of the variance in engagement at organizations comes down to the leader. So I just think about investing in inclusive leadership. Like if we have more inclusive leaders, that probably helps us accomplish the vast majority of what we're looking to do with this work. And then combine that with data and some of the other things you mentioned today, Doneisha, I think that is at least 80% of the way I would have to guess to making things better. So I think that's the idea. How do we invest in helping our leaders become more inclusive leaders?
I love that you're so on point with that. I think a lot of you who work in organizations that is moving your equity work forward, you can look and you can think it's because my leader, right? Our leader is super inclusive. They are pushing things forward. They understand what's happening and they're willing to be bold in this time. All right, so my final reflections here, we've covered a lot. I do want to leave you with this. DEI is not dead. It may be evolving, but the work that we're doing is not dead. 2025 did not mark the end of the work that we do, but it did force us to confront what it takes to sustain this work. It's taught us that compliance is not the same as impact. You can be legally compliant and still harm people, but you can also be mission driven and still get sued, right? Strategy has to bridge that gap. Strategy is the key. The organizations that have weathered the storm were the ones that treated DEI not as a side initiative, but as an integrated, adaptive strategy. And most of all, silence is a stance. Many organizations said nothing during key moments in 2025. That silence has spoken volumes to their staff, to their communities, and to their stakeholders. So, where do we go from here? We audit and adapt, not just legally, but also culturally, right? We're going to audit and adapt our policies. We're going to train our leaders and equipped our legal leaders, to hold this work with integrity. Andrew just spoke on that, ensuring that our leadership understands and has the tools to be inclusive leaders is so important. What else are we going to do? We're going to prioritize people over politics. Claire just kind of touched on this as well. But understand that risk is sometimes the cost of doing the right thing. And finally, we need to reclaim the narrative. We don't let others define what equity means in our work. We need to lead with courage and clarity. So I appreciate you all being part of this conversation. The fact that you're here tells me that you're ready to do this work. So let's continue the work. Thank you so much. Here's my contact information. That QR code allows you to book some free time with me if you just want to chat. I know my time is up. I think I'm able to stay for the next 20 minutes. I don't know if this was supposed to, if folks have to leave at 9:30, but I'm happy to stay and chat with folks. Thank you so much.